Dan Erickson, you created, write, and produced the series Severance, about a world where technology can split your consciousness between your work life and your home life. First off, was there a lot of world building and conceptualizing that had to be done just at the very start of the process before even the story started taking shape?
Yeah, it was it was funny. It was a very it was a very long process. I'll say first of all, because I had been sort of shopping this idea around to various places before it landed on Ben Stiller's desk. And like the very first iteration of it, the script for which I think is like out on the internet somewhere, but it was much weirder. It was like a much more kind of insane Terry Gilliam-esque, world where there was a lot more kind of magical realism stuff happening. And, over working on the script with, my manager, with various people where I was shopping it. And then ultimately, of course, with Ben, we sort of honed in on the weird elements of the world that we really loved and the parts of it that we wanted to be kind of surreal and heightened, and then the parts of it where we wanted it to feel more grounded, more human. And Ben was always very adamant. He's like, I don't want to kill the weird. I don't want to kill the weirdness of it. But also I think that there is a very human, very relatable story to be told here within the confines of this kind of insane conceit, which I think, I like to think is a very distant science fiction concept, but I'm terrified that somewhere somebody's already trying to do it, having watched the show. So yeah, it was the world building was a huge part of it, and that was one of the hardest parts, but also one of the most fun.
And the reality of Severance gets more and more disturbing as the season goes along. From that initial premise and that first script, did the unsettling nature of being severed and all the implications of it, did that surprise even you as you were going along?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's part of the reason that it's a series and not a movie or like a weird, short, is that it is something that the more you get into the story and the more that you just sort of unpack what are the natural, logical consequences of this technology, like how would people use that? It just gets scarier and weirder and more upsetting. So, to create, optimum misery for our audience, we had to do it as a series. But it is something that, I feel like we've only scratched the surface in season 1 in terms of like how, disassociation and the desire to sort of disassociate from parts of our lives or parts of ourselves that we maybe don't like. It's such a rampant thing, in real life that there's just so many other ways to think about like how might people actually use this technology in the real world if it existed, and that provides almost endless story opportunities.
Yeah, it does feel eerily close to our current reality of corporate culture. Like, if not the technology, then the world in which that technology would exist. Like, for instance, I feel like Elon Musk would 100% use this.
Yeah, I've said Elon Musk is not allowed to watch this show, but I don't know if he's going to respect that wish.
Yeah. What do you think of how technology just in the real world has shaped the reality of work in general, and how does that sort of inspire you for the show?
Well, it's funny because we we wrote and were getting ready to make this show in a pre-pandemic world, and then COVID hit and we made it largely during the pandemic. And it was definitely something where I was thinking, like, as we were having writers meetings via Zoom and everybody's trying to figure out how Zoom works, it occurred to me for sure. I was like, are we making the most like comically, is this something that is going to be totally irrelevant by the time it comes out? Because we're basically making an office show at a time when offices appear to maybe be going extinct. And what I found was the case instead was, I think that because of Zoom and because of a lot of developments that have happened since the pandemic, it's actually, and social media and all these other things, like it's actually become much harder to define the work-life balance. And you can be working, you can do your work 10 feet away from where you sleep, and you're theoretically always reachable. And that I think it actually just made the questions that we were raising more relevant, although in a way that we didn't necessarily anticipate. So it's yeah, I mean, I feel like technology is always developing, and it's always eroding our boundaries a little bit, whether we want it to or not. And so I think that that's always going to be a relevant question.
And with this world you've created, growing and expanding over, time, going into, the second season, which you're working on, how far ahead have you plotted the show? Like, do you have ideas for it going multiple seasons, or, do you really kind of just take, it one season at a time?
I have a dartboard that I throw darts at, and it has plot points on it, and that's what we use. It's not planned at all. No, that's not true. We do have a plan. It's funny because this is my first rodeo in a way, in terms of this is my first time sort of creating a show and trying to sustain it over multiple seasons. So I've been trying to sort of hit that balance of, they say you can over plan, and become sort of beholden to a plan where you don't end up bringing out the most interesting elements of the show. But of course you can also underplan and find yourself kind of floundering and not knowing where you're going. So there's, I've had a sort of end game in mind the whole time we've been doing it, but there's a lot of different twists and turns it can take along the way, many of which we certainly don't have figured out yet.
The end plan that you have in mind, getting there is room for you to pivot as new ideas or avenues, interest you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even it's happened already. It's like, the very first draft of the script, for example, I've said this, so I think I'm allowed to say this, and won't get in trouble, but it was originally Mark waking up on the table instead of Helly, and we were sort of following this new character who was showing up in this world. And there's just stuff like that where you talk through it and you're like, well, it's in a way it might be more interesting, if our main character has a history in this office and has a sense of a routine that's being upended by this new person showing up. So it's stuff like that where it's like you make the best plan you can, but then something comes along and either screws it up or makes it better, and you have to be open to both.
The show got 3 Writers Guild nominations, including one specifically for the finale episode, "The We Are." Was it cathartic getting to pay off so much story? You're building obviously more questions, but getting to pay off a lot of stories and questions and ideas and anticipation in that episode.
Oh yeah, that was. I mean that was It's funny. It's the shortest episode, and it's the episode that I did the fewest rewrites of. Like that script ended up pretty similar to the original first draft that I turned in, and I think that that's because we had, for all the other episodes, we're trying to sort of intricately build this scaffolding and make it really make it all work and make it cool. But we always knew that we wanted that last episode to just be like tipping over a domino and just be like, okay, now we can just go. And it's going to be this very visceral, almost real-time experience that these innie characters are having upon waking up. And they're making these really messed up discoveries that we're making along with them. And so that was always the idea with that episode. And I'm just so glad it worked, because you never know in writing it. It's like, is this just going to be boring or strange? But yeah, it was so sad. Like, I remember when I saw the first cut of that episode, like finished, I was just like, yeah, that's exactly what we wanted. So it was cool.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your Writers Guild nominations and the success of the show. And, best of luck on season 2. Looking forward to seeing it when it's done.
Thank you. Thank you so much.